I'm back kind of soon today, but I wanted to go ahead and make a video based on Ketu. I said in one of my last videos about astrology that I could go on a whole rant about Rahu and Ketu, or the North and South Node in Western astrology, and since today, well, tonight is the lunar eclipse in Leo actually, I figured that it would be a really good time to just do some fun eclipse inspired, blood moon inspired makeup and just kind of rant rant about Rahu and Ketu. And I'm very biased. I am a Ketu lady after all, but I still wanted to just get on here and kind of chat a little bit while I did my makeup for today. And yeah, so yeah, I'm not going to be like doing really a makeup tutorial, but I am kind of going to be using a mixture of different palettes to kind of get like that irony, terracotta, like blood-like effect of the lunar eclipse. And I've only seen one lunar eclipse before, but I am definitely going to be staying up late tonight to try and see this one because it's in Leo and I'm excited. Ketu, or the South Node, is what creates the lunar eclipse in astrology. It's a shadow planet, or like a mathematical calculated point, because the eclipses happen cyclically, so they can be calculated. And so Ketu, or like I said, the South Node, is always opposite Rahu, or the North Node, which is the calculated point for the solar eclipse. So both of these points are considered to be sort of enemies to the sun and moon, and they are a demon that was separated in the Vedic lore. They were separated because they were standing in the way of like these Deva people, and the gods and deities. Okay, so I'm just starting to get a little bit of a base here for my shimmers. I'm using a couple of just very like warm brown, super warm brown tones. Anyway, I wanted to get you a little bit more zoomed in so maybe you could see better. So yes, Rahu and Ketu are the same being that were separated into the head and the body of like a serpentine demonic being. And it really reminds me of like the way that dragons are described in media and like TV shows, video games, and mythology. It seems like these serpentine, or like if you hear about like lizard people and stuff like that, it seems like these serpentine beings are very, let me see if I can get in, are very antagonistic to humans. And I think that that is also true for the joint entity that Rahu and Ketu were. And so I think that misanthropic view is definitely carried on with Rahu and Ketu in the North and South Node. And I think that's why they're considered to be malefic. However, I do want to point out that while Rahu, or the North Node, is purely considered malefic, to the point where there's like a particular hour of the day that I look up if anything really like important is happening. Like if I'm making a big purchase or planning an event, I always look up the Rahu Kalam, which is an inauspicious part of the day where they really recommend that you, don't do things that are important during that time because it can really mess with the outcome. However, Ketu, while it can be malefic, it can also be benefic. So it's not like a wholly negative thing. basically. So anyway, they were separated into two opposing parts, which are the north and the south node of the moon, and they represent these different entities standing in the way of the sun and the moon, which are, you know, they're the biggest things in the sky. They have the biggest impact on us, and astrologically, they are two of the most important parts of the chart for everybody. And so you can really see that both Rahu and Ketu, even through the people with the nakshatras, the lunar mansions that they rule, people who are ruled by Rahu and Ketu can be very anti-society and very counterculture in different ways, but they both share that trait. And I definitely think that comes from, like I said, this entity not being very fond of people, of humanity. And if you think of I think I'm going to go ahead and, well, I'm going to do a little bit more depth. I thought I was going to go ahead and go with the shimmer, but I think I'm going to do a little more depth on the lash line. I've been doing a lot of experimenting with my makeup lately, so I'm ready to go back to something familiar, which is very South Node. But yeah, even if you think of like the book of Revelations in the Bible, they talk about when the sun goes dark and the moon runs red, which is in reference to the North and South Node. And so these events are important, although they can be very disruptive, especially for people who are more attached. For people who are more attached to their ego and their lives and what they think that they are in this earthly plane. And so these nodal events can really stir up those feelings of dissatisfaction, because in my opinion, we are being asked to reevaluate and make sure that we come back into alignment with our purpose and what we are meant to do, and not getting distracted by the ebbs and flows of society and trends that can really get us all off kilter, no matter what our destiny path is. I think also just another thing with Rahu and Ketu jointly, and not specifically Ketu, is they remind me of Jormungandr, the Ouroboros from, I believe, Norse mythology that is encircling the earth. So once again, more like serpentine vibes, but he's eating his own tail. And because Rahu and Ketu are separated, Rahu, being the head of this dragon being, is forever hungry and consuming, but Ketu is all of those things that Rahu is deprived of, that it is looking for, because it's not a whole, complete being anymore. And so I think this vibe of this never-ending cycle that keeps us tethered here and stuck in this planet reminds me a lot of that Norse mythology, of just like this endless cycle of death and rebirth. And Ketu in particular, the Ketu nakshatras, the lunar mansions that I talked about in my other video, they are the start of each cycle within the zodiac. So even just Ashwini, which is the very first sign, is a Ketu nakshatra, which again just is like this starting over all over again and reattaching to the planet and just having this instinct to reincarnate over and over again. So I definitely think that it's a mixture of Rahu's cravings, this bodiless head that is forever just pursuing its passions, the North Node, and Ketu's nostalgia and attachment to the past and what it's already experienced in past lives or within this life, that really keep us tethered here. And I think that can be a good or a bad thing depending on how you feel about this planet. So on to the shimmers, and on to Ketu in particular. I said in my other video that I think it's a shame. Ooh, look how pretty that is. I don't know if you can tell. I I think it's a shame that sometimes in Western astrology, Ketu, or the South Node, gets reduced to just being this thing that should just be abandoned and left behind and evolved from. Like, it's this thing that's holding you back, which it definitely can be. But like I was saying earlier, Ketu itself is both benefic and malefic when it comes to Eastern astrology. So since it's both benefic and malefic, I don't really agree with this idea that it should just be left behind while Rahu, or the North Node, is what you came here to do. I don't really agree with that. Because the things that Ketu represents, which I'm going to get into, I wanted to talk about some of the things that are negative about Ketu first. So, because Ketu is really disinterested in the material realm, and you can see this a lot through Ketu people as well, they are very detached and apathetic and really disinterested. And even if they are ambitious and they follow their ambitions or have desire, like earthly desires, once they obtain these things, they typically see how unfulfilling it is. And we all have a Ketu sign. And if I'm just kind of speaking as a Ketu person, that it's really easy to be disillusioned. And I feel like this apathy and disillusionment, oh sorry, my cat's getting into the closet, can lead to people becoming really unmotivated and even stagnant and really still in life, and not getting the beauty, because there is beauty in the physical realm. But if you are just so uninterested, you won't see that. And I feel like it's that inertia thing too. It's like once you start to slow down and once you start to detach, it's really hard to get out of that hole. So that is definitely very much not good. It's not good for our mental health. It's not even good for our spiritual health, which is what I'm going to get into next. Is the benefic side of Ketu is that they are so attached to past lives. So Ketu itself is very spiritual realm, very mystical, very much of the unseen realm, which is coming from their detachment from the head, which is Rahu, and the senses. So Rahu is the one experiencing sight and taste and sound and smell, but Ketu is completely removed from all of that, and so they're operating much more on an instinctual level. And because of that, it forces them to be a lot more spiritual and intuitive, which is a positive thing. This association that Ketu has with the past also extends to our past lives, and Claire Nocti actually does a lot of writing about this on her blog, talking about accessing your Ketu for creativity and unlocking talents, like past life talents and stuff, which is where I have the biggest issue with just disregarding it, is because just because something is from a past life and no longer happening, or even something that you've done before in this life, or just came with maybe your ancestry, something your family's always done, it isn't automatically a bad thing. It's not automatically something that should just be disregarded. Not for everybody and not for everything. In some cases, it is good to just already have that wisdom built in and not having to spend all this time relearning it, basically. I agree. I think that Claire Nocti talking about accessing these things and really speaking with your inner self that's connected to your higher self is very Ketu. Like, you have to really detach from your logical brain to be able to access that side of the world. Also, the main purpose of Ketu, his main goal in life, is to detach us and take things materially away from us that are distracting us from moksha, which is like enlightenment, salvation, heaven within, like ascension, whatever your belief system is, it's all the same thing. It's this release from suffering. And in all of these different religions, not to take like a Gnostic approach or anything, but genuinely in all of these different paths, it talks about how our obsession with the flesh, the material realm, the physical things creates a lot of suffering because we're attaching to things that are out of our control. But Ketu, being the physical body and within in the spiritual realm, is eternal, is fully in our control. And I think even psychologically, focusing on things that we are already good at and we do have familiarity with can give us that sense of security that we need, even if we are desiring more and want to go and get things out of this world and pursue our Rahu and pursue our North Node. I think that that can be helped by accessing our Ketu as a good basis for fulfillment, because it creates a lot of satisfaction. If you are not attached to the physical realm, you already have a sense of fulfillment and like you don't need to keep striving. And of course that can, like I said, become really malefic if you're completely disillusioned and you are totally unmotivated and don't even want to act and are basically in a depressive state. But I do think it shields from that anxious Rahuvian nature and the more aggressively malefic side of this combo. I like that. I like having like a weird sparkly neutral on the inside and then the outside is like a metallic multichrome. I've never done that before, but I really like it. I don't know if you can see really well in this light. So yeah, more about Ketu. All of the Ketu nakshatras, because the planets, including the shadow planets Rahu and Ketu, they rule 3 nakshatras. And so the 3 that Ketu rules are all in the fire signs, in the beginning of the fire signs. So the beginning of Aries is Ashwini Nakshatra. The beginning of Leo is Magha Nakshatra. And the beginning of Sagittarius is Mula. And they're all ruled by Ketu. And I was also saying in my other video that these signs can have a lot more in common than even other signs within the same zodiac. So these 3, Magha, Mula, and Ashwini, can have a lot more in common than, you know, the 3 signs in Sagittarius or Leo. And they're all very fiery, so they're fully in the fire signs. Not all nakshatras are all in one sign. Some of them, like Dhanishta, is halfway in Aquarius and halfway in Capricorn, and on the other side of Aquarius, Purva Bhadrapada is halfway in Aquarius, and not exactly halfway, but mostly in Aquarius and a little bit into Pisces. But the Ketu nakshatras are completely in the fire signs and at the very beginning of the fire signs. And so to me, they all have this really smoldering, hot coals type of a dark, fiery energy, and I wanted to kind of have that vibe today for my makeup. So I'm going to have to probably add some black to do that, but that's okay. I'm going to do a little bit more blending. And Claire Nocti, I think I will link this video below. She has a really cool series where she talks about the planetary influences on our physical appearance, and she has like a Ketu Beauties video, and you can really see that sort of smoldering depth, darkness type of a thing that I think a lot of people would associate with Scorpio, which is really interesting because traditionally, and I would agree that Ketu is actually exalted in Scorpio. So Ketu is very associated with Scorpio energy. So you see people with really, really dark hair and really still hypnotic appearance where they're very, like they're just taking everything in, but not in a very attentive sort of a way. Almost like they're distracted by their own thoughts and their own inner spiritual processes going on. And you can just see that detachment within them. And something else that's very fiery and I think is interesting, an interesting commonality between the Ketu signs, here let me zoom you out just a little bit. An interesting commonality that I've noticed with all of the Ketu nakshatras, and Ketu people in general, even if they don't have the nakshatras, is health, mental health, physical health, spiritual health. Like you see with Ashwini is literally ruled by twin doctors to the gods, and Mars is the physical body, so that makes sense for Aries. But even Maga and Mula are very health focused and like body focused. Like Mula people are usually bodybuilders, and Maga people are usually very interested in mental health and psychology and things like generational trauma and issues that happen over a lifetime. Let's see, I gotta do my eyeliner and talk at the same time, so that's gonna be fun. I think you can see that even though Ketu is very detached from the physical plane, because they are the physical body, they still have this real interest in health. And conversely, I've really noticed that Rahuvian people are very disinterested in their health, mental, physical, spiritual. And so they can sometimes suffer a lot from either just weakness, like being physically, because I think also, not to talk smack about Rahu people, I love Rahu people, but I feel like they can get so caught up. And if you are ruled by Rahu or the solar eclipse or born near the solar eclipse, I feel like this can be true for you too. They can be so caught up in their desires and consumptions that they destroy themselves in the process, and they're so focused on other people because they're completely in the air signs, and so they're very in their head, and they are the head, that it can just lead to them neglecting their physical needs. And so that's another beneficial side of Ketu, I think, is that we can have that sort of self-focus to actually maintain our physical body. And I think nowadays, especially, technology is also something ruled by Rahu, because Rahu, just as a little tidbit, maybe I'll do a different video about Rahu in the future, but Rahu rules technology. They're very brilliant people because they are the head, and because they don't like the status quo, and they still, like I said, have that misanthropic view, and they have their own vision for what they want society to be, and they're very involved in that way, rather than Ketu being very detached and counterculture and sort of like goth and punk and wanting to be in their own world. Rahu's very obsessed with the woes of the world, and they want to change things, and they want to implement a new system and way of doing things. And so because of that, they're masters over inventions and technology and all of those sort of things. So I really feel like we are in a very Rahuvian era right now because of that. Like, I'm obviously sitting here like talking to the internet with devices that allow me to do that is a miracle of our time, and is a good thing about Rahu. But at the same time, this sense of convenience can once again lead to addiction. So we can literally just go to the McDonald's and pick up unhealthy food, or open up our little computer and just start scrolling away until our brain rots out of our head. So without having that counterbalance, like I said, it's very easy to just like give in and have no way out of this never ending, because it won't end, you know, just like you could scroll genuinely forever. There, at least here in the United States, there's like an endless amount of food that we could eat forever until we just get so huge and sick that there's nothing that we can do about it. And yeah, I think that that's kind of one of the benefits too of focusing in on our Ketu, which is like the whole point of today. Is like tonight is the lunar eclipse, which is Ketu energy. So I think it's a good time to really go within and think about different attachments that we can release, because full moons in general are about releasing. And so I think it would be a good time with this added eclipse energy to think about anything that we could release that is standing in the way of any Leo things. For me, as an artist, obviously, I'm wanting to look in and see what sort of ways that I can clear more space to be more prolific and be more creative and access any past lives or any hidden talents that reside within me, and a lot of my family members and ancestors are artists, and so I think this is a really good time to sort of contemplate that and dwell on that, to try and access more creativity and self-expression through connecting with the eclipse responsibly, because it is still malefic, okay? These eclipses are not to be messed with. I know everybody wants to go out and just like see the pretty thing happening in the sky. Spiritual health is important too, and it's a little irresponsible to just let the nodal energy just come in without any sort of structure, or like, you gotta frankincense yourself, man. Like, get you some Palo Santo before you go out staring at the eclipse. But yes, I still think it's a good time, if you are spiritually inclined at all, to think about that, to journal about that. Okay, so had to go off camera for liner and mascara, but this is pretty much the finished look. I hope you enjoyed my random rant about Ketu. I felt inspired today because of the lunar eclipse happening, and hopefully it was interesting. I'm just using a little bit of this Bobbi Brown like crushed lipstick, just a neutral one, and I'm not going to use any blush or anything. I wanted to channel that kind of gothic alternative Ketu vibes, but I think that it came out pretty smoldery, and it kind of reminds me of the blood moon, or like a fire burning under like starlight or something, like a dark fire in that way. And yeah, I hope that if you didn't know about the lunar eclipse, it's happening today. And like I said, I'm just going to go outside and check it out with my husband and just try to remember anything that I can about being creative, because it's in Leo, it's in Uttara Falguni, which is doubly ruled by the sun, and the sun is all those beautiful, self-expressive, creative things. So yeah, I hope you have a celestial, divine night.